you guys have already heard Gwen's background, but she's a superstar as far as I'm concerned. She's always willing to be generous with information and mentoring, and I've always learned so much from her, and I'm hoping that you guys will also learn.
Thank you, Pemo. Thank you. So Pemo asked me to say a few words and really engage in a dialogue. And I thought what would, given that you're all entrepreneurs primarily, and it's not a mix of investors and entrepreneurs, I thought what would be really nice to do is kind of dig deeper from the panel that we just finished. And because we have such an interesting group today with half of you from other countries and half of you local.
Whose phone's ringing? Can we turn the sound off the phones, please?
Okay. That it got me thinking about, when you come from Saudi Arabia or Tunisia, these interesting places that many of you have come from, how do you get the richness of the experience in Silicon Valley, and how do you learn from that and bring it back home? And what are the common elements? And I thought, well, here we have entrepreneurs that are resident right here in Silicon Valley, and we have many of you from other countries. And it just got, and by the way, I want to say that I've also spent a little bit of time in India in an effort to understand how radically different some of the ecosystems are and what's possible to do from the US from an investment perspective. And so I have at least some degree of appreciation of how vastly different these ecosystems are for investors and for entrepreneurs, because they're very different places to be to try to build a business. And but I found, as I was thinking about today and the mix of people in the room, I thought, there's really so much more that is common to being an entrepreneur than not. And I think that, there's almost this sense that we're really spoiled here because there's so much access to capital. But what maybe isn't understood is there are also tons of entrepreneurs, and it's still not easy to raise money. You really have to differentiate yourself. And so if you go back to, well, what are the core elements that would be shared, whether you're in Tunisia or Saudi Arabia or Silicon Valley, I came up with 10 things that I thought really made sense as common elements. And I thought I could just kind of walk through those, and then I'd really love to hear from each of you about, what your experience is and if this resonates, and maybe we can get some exchange going amongst you. So the first thing I thought about is, just the sheer power of bootstrapping. And not that it means raising $2 million, right? But truly, what the money that is most valuable, whether you're sitting here or you're sitting somewhere else, is customer money. And finding customers, even if you don't yet have your product, but customers that are sitting there saying, I've got a perfect example right now of a company I'm working with that has 2 men, but I'm really intrigued with what they're doing. They have 17 pilot companies, all Fortune 500s, that have said, I want this so badly. And all they've built so far is a web page. And they've described what they're doing. They've defined the problem. They know the problem. Just that information is what drew me to say, I'll help you, to these guys. Because they're validating that they've got a real problem that they found, and I have to just trust that they'll build a solution, and they've got the backgrounds. And then I said to them, okay, here's the next step you want to do before you raise a dime. Go back to every one of those pilots, and let's start testing their willingness to pay. Let's build some pricing models, let's take them out, let's work with them, let's see what they'll do. So that we're in the middle of that as we speak. So, whether there's tons of money here or not, they're going to get a better valuation and do better by getting that customer input. And that's, you know, a simple way of thinking about bootstrapping. But the same thing, you know, regardless of the country you're in, you can turn around and really look hard at the problem and where are those customers that can validate, that are local, and then how do you translate that to other markets. And I think the only kind of exception to that, that's extra challenging is places where you've got just amazing technology. And we see this, you know, popping out of Poland and Hungary and, you know, or amazing bioscience, life science companies, where it's just the technology. And then my only kind of key thing to plead with is to say it's so important to find people with marketing skills and market knowledge to be by your side. Because I think those are the companies, even if they were sitting here, that are going to be the highest risk but highest potential. But if you're in, you know, another part of the world and you're removed from a large market that's within your country, then I think it's even more important to find that teammate who can be the marketing arm and represent you. And so let's see. I think the next item is really this whole notion of minimally viable products that certainly translates, whether you're here or abroad. And then another is something we kind of thrive on here, which is the power of role models. And I thought, you know, if you're not physically here and you don't bump into these people that, you know, we're enamored with for good reason, then you could probably either translate that experience to who is in your country that has, you know, maybe they're retired now or there's somebody from, you know, many, many years ago. But I think there's a way to really tap your local markets and find those people that can be your role model, whether they become an advisory board member or not, or participate with you in building out your company. And that leads to the importance of advisory boards, which is something we really remind people of here. Somebody once said to me years ago when I was excited about a company, and they said, but Gwen, this company doesn't even yet have an advisory board. And my first reaction was, well, so what? They're early. You know, take a look at them. And this person said, yes, but why would I put money in when someone else won't put their reputation on the line? Someone with domain knowledge. So that, you know, has stuck with me, that it just says it's a way to validate again. You can validate with customers, you can validate with people who know your industry, and they'll bank on you with their reputation. Then just the power of networking. You know, it's something that we almost teach people how to do here because everybody goes to networking events all the time. But, you know, in your own, if you're not here and in your own hometown, you know, just something to think about is every time you have an opportunity to talk to someone about your idea or your business, just remember to, you know, repeat back and thank them for the learning. But all you have to do is say, is there someone else you know that you think I should know, that I should be introduced to? And 9 times out of 10, people will say, oh, yeah, you know, let me think about that. Maybe you should call Charlie, or, you know, and so it builds. And I think that's something you can add to just your daily work, again, regardless of where you're physically located. And then, you know, there's a lot of talk about use of proceeds, which just means, you know, really be mindful and careful about how you're using money. And that is, you know, there are times in Silicon Valley where we have these heyday experiences, and, you know, in the 90s, people were buying the fancy cappuccino makers, etc. Those are long gone. And I think, you know, I've been often told that some of the best outcomes for an entrepreneur comes from the fact that they couldn't raise money or didn't raise it easily, and they got really far and had a great exit and ended up owning a big chunk of the company. So I just say that in particular for those of you who aren't based here, and you can think about still having a lot of equity in what you own at the end of the day. And then just one more thing. I think I'm out of time. I have 3. Okay. So something else we see a lot is how important it is to really know the financials of your business. Somebody at the break was asking me a question, and it's the same thing. It's like they don't quite yet know how much money they're going to need, how much to raise. But that, regardless of where you live, really taking time to learn a lot about how to own the financials and not count on a CFO or somebody that's helping you get the help, but really know what you need, what you're going to spend. That's so important. And when you're taking in outside money, people want to know that you're going to guard it and use it well. And then okay, the last 2 things. One is thinking about every country has different tax advantages, and I have no idea what countries are fully represented, but some of them are much, much richer than here, like Scotland and Ireland, and so I just would say to really research what's unique to your particular physical geographic area. There may be grants that you can apply for, all kinds of things that are unique, and not to assume that this is the best model necessarily. And then last, having lived in other places, and I know it's a little harder to be an entrepreneur in other places, mainly because if you think about it, entrepreneurship is the lifeblood of Silicon Valley. The world revolves around it. If you work for Cisco or Google, it's still about the entrepreneur and what company are we going to buy and who just joined them and now they're going out to be an angel investor. I mean, it's the lifeblood. And that's happening also up in San Francisco now. It's kind of the same thing. And, you can't say that of Toronto or, Florida. I mean, it's so unique. But I think what that says is, as an entrepreneur, you need a stronger network, a friendship, people that you can call and talk to and will remind you that you're not crazy. And you really should keep going with that idea. And I wondered if that's something that could be part of the collaboration that's within the incubation process that you're going through now, just having more networking events and Skype and, just really remembering to stay connected to each other and maybe finding some buddies over here that you can be in communication with, because one of the cool things is the world is definitely shrinking with respect to being able to stay in touch. And it's great when it's shrinking and the markets are still getting bigger. So
we've got like 30 minutes that we can ask Gwen questions. Anyone got any questions for Gwen? I'll pass it over to you. You can share with them.
Okay. Can I just ask you, what is it like? I mean, what have you concluded so far? Those of you who are part of the program from PitMe, and you're here from other countries, what have you concluded? And are there?
I just joined last night.
You just joined last night? Ah, okay. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I asked this question earlier, but I didn't. I just posed it to the group. So if you're launching a company and you plan to do business in every, sort of corner of the world, and you're about to start the funding, and would you recommend that maybe obviously you come to Silicon Valley and maybe you start here, but that you look for funding in some of the major markets that you're going to, just to give you sort of a broader base in other countries, or is that not necessary? So you have a presence in Brazil, you have a presence in Asia, you have a presence in, Middle East, you have, I don't know, just, what's your recommendation if you're really launching globally and you're gonna launch globally fast? How do you fund that?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Even just the notion of launching globally fast is
I know.
making my head spin. But I think I think if you can think about staging, so you've got your core fundamentals of the business down, and you're even just going across the country is often a big deal, depending on what your business is. So you want to really make sure it's replicatable and it's high quality. I have no idea what your business is, but I think trying to raise additional funds from other countries is really interesting. I actually
Just,
hadn't thought about
don't
that.
know if that solidifies your
Yeah.
presence more in the sort of major, countries and markets that you're going to, if you have investors locally. Just asking,
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah,
Roger maybe. That's my.
yeah.
Let's do it.
I have a quick question. And if you're funding a startup, what do you think is the best use of the funds initially? Infrastructure, people, or marketing?
I would say, when you say infrastructure, what do you mean?
I mean, having all the communications ready. Customer service, having distribution. Warehousing. For example, on e-commerce. Just as far as having all the back end ready, or if I really need that technical person that invest in that engineer, or if I just have a early ready e-commerce company, and I want to just put a lot of money to market. Just the priorities when you start.
Yeah. Well, I would say definitely not infrastructure if you mean buildings and places for people to go to work. Because we can now do so much virtually that's not a good use of money. I think that, the core of the business really has to be the technology probably in your example. So I would want the money to go first to that, and then figuring out how to get it tested. So I think the marketing piece would probably come later. I don't know what stage this is at, but it really depends on the stage of the company. But if it's
now the priority to have it, be able to, that at the beginning, being able to use the funds wisely at the beginning.
yeah, I would say I would focus it on the core capabilities that you have to build, and then finding really prototypical customers. So thinking about who's the brand name customer that if they said, I love this platform, would make your company. And then trying to go to those people, targeted specific individuals within those brands, big brands, and have them tell you if they wouldn't buy it today based on X, what would it take? What features would make it absolutely hands down the winner? So that's the kind of marketing data I would gather, and it doesn't take money. It takes intelligence and time to get to the right people and ask the right questions. Yes.
My name is Tom Zimberoff. I'm really just curious about this, and don't take the question too cynically, but I wanted to ask the other panel, but how often do you find other angels investing in companies with the idea of an exit strategy being an Aqua Hire, as opposed to I'm really investing in this company because I really believe that this is going to be a great company?
Nobody wants to invest in an Aqua Hire.
I didn't think so.
An Aqua Hire is considered a failure by the investors because they're usually screwed.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And you can ask that question of the people who do the Aqua Hiring because they will admit it. But that's basically when a company is giving you, the CEO, money to draw you and your technical team over to them, and they make sure they give you enough money to get you hooked, but not enough money that it's wasted on paying back the investors. So it's definitely a failure for the investors. Yeah. So, but people love to have, angels love to have deals where it's going to be an acquisition in, everybody dreams of 2 to 3 years. Everybody says, oh, in 2 to 3 years we're going to be acquired by blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, double that number and then hope it works. But it's, we really love to see opportunities that it's a clear focus and here's a way to get an exit. So I think that's one of the major distinctions between angel and venture. Okay, thanks. Thanks for asking. Clarify that. Anything else?
So if I will have a startup and I clearly could have more markets in more countries, so should I do that, like I open, for instance, I could open the company in America and then I would say, okay, I can do that in Brazil, I can do that in London, UK, Russia. Should I start opening markets and looking for investment, or should I get the investment and then go there? What would be strategic campaign in terms of raising capital? Like to get more countries right away and say, yes, I can be growing all over the place. So,
Wow. The classic line, focus, focus, focus. It's hard to build a business in one country. So I think you just really add to your risk of failing if you try to do too many countries at a time. So I would really think about where will you get the best traction, which market, this market, Russia, Brazil. Brazil's hot right now for certain things. I would look at where you get the best traction, start there. And then once you've got your cash flow positive, I would say, I don't know again what the nature of the business is, but I would really look to having something be a going concern and then take it out. And I would still look for investor money to come in with those secondary markets before bringing it to them. Because they'll also help you validate whether they think this would, whatever you're doing would fly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if they would be comfortable to step into another markets, I guess, to
Right.
get their permission.
Right.
If
Right.
they want to go to China or not, or maybe they should wait for IPO here first.
Right.
Then go.
It may sound parochial, but I can think of cases, one that comes to mind right away, of a company that started in Seattle, and their dream at the time was to have franchises around the country. And then they opened up in LA. Then they discovered the San Francisco market. The characteristics of those 3 markets, which are all West Coast, were so different that they pulled away. They decided not to franchise, and actually they become a product company instead of a service company. But I bring that up just as a little example. If markets are that different by geography in the same country, on the same coast, what happens when you go to Russia and Brazil and the UK? Yeah, you've really got to know those markets and think about it. So I'd get on my feet first, make sure you've got good traction from a market, you're making money, and then think about how to expand. Does that work?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question. It seems like it's more about timing than anything else. I had a pleasure once of hearing Adam Chyer, the founder of Siri, was bought by Apple Talk, and I don't think he does much public talk, but something called Startup Weekend in Berkeley. He was there, and he made his presentation describing himself as a parallel entrepreneur. And it seems like it's you say the world is getting smaller, and so, but also you can do more now than you could do before. So he successfully built 3 startups at once, and they were all like way different. So he was part of Change.org, and he did a financial distributed computing company, and on top of doing Siri. And so one kind of fulfilled his social interest to give back to the community, one was to make money, and one was more of a technological challenge. And so what we see is that entrepreneurs, they're making these decisions on an individual level, and then and it gets harder and harder for a VC to find where's that sweet spot for when it's ready to it has that kind of local success, and then you can take it globally. So if you look at Google, and especially Google, they needed the capital to run the servers and all that. But nowadays that's not necessarily needed, as it's not as prevalent. You can do variable pricing, and the variable cost is the most important. So do you have any thoughts about how the importance of being data driven going forward to find that the timing aspect of it?
To make the decisions?
Right, yeah, because there's so many factors now that comes into play, and it's really hard without that kind of tool to help you make those decisions, to make the right decisions at the right time.
Right. Well, just a comment on having the take rate from other countries. There are businesses that you can launch that get launched, and all of a sudden that company finds they have buyers from Australia and England and Middle East. They don't even market to those countries. So I mean, there are ways that you can start to see that there's interest from other places, just because if it's an internet-based offer, people can find you and become customers. I guess I would say with the example of the person who founded Siri, I hope he wasn't CEO of all 3 of those companies at once. Maybe he was a founder of one and a founder of another, and really getting involved. It's just, in my experience, it's kind of all-consuming to build a business, and try to get some sleep if you can. I mean, it's just really super stressful, and you have to kind of thrive on that. So I don't know. Was he the person who was at SRI at the time?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Right.
I guess if you Elon Musk, you can do 2.
That's true, yeah, that's pretty amazing
I
too.
think you build good teams. So
Yeah,
you need to figure it out.
yeah, yeah.
But I think to your point, it's interesting, how they all cross.
Right, so for most,
There's a value to that cross,
Yeah.
especially nowadays. Yeah.
right. So there is a synergy, but at the same time you spread yourself thin. So and as an investor, it's really hard to make that call. Is this going to be massive failure or big success?
Right.
And also there's a big disconnect between, you mentioned also if you retain capital if you bootstrap as long as possible, you typically have a bigger success. But then again, you put yourself at risk because you might run out of money and miss some kind of sweet spot there, where investors
Right.
are willing to put in, but you're not willing to take it. When you're ready to take it, they're not interested in it. So.
Right. No, that's definitely a challenge. And in fact, honestly, even from an investor perspective, there's data that shows that when a company is purely bootstrapped and then you get involved towards the end, the return is not as high as if it had money at some point. And the reason for that is money gives you fuel to be bigger. And the bigger you are, then you have a higher multiple and you get a better exit. So it's just that I think now so much can be done that's bootstrapped at the very beginning. So you've got those proof points. And 10 years ago or 20 years ago, people were trying to get technologies funded that couldn't be bootstrapped. So it was a different game, much different game.
Gwen, you mentioned in your introduction you were interested in investing in social purpose companies. Can you tell us what that is, why you're interested, and give us an example of one?
Sure. Well, I'm a big believer in the fact that business can make a change. And the business community is so powerful. I think it's more powerful than political organizations, etc. And I often say to people, as much as I love Hillary Clinton and her role as Secretary of State, I think the CEO of Apple did more for human rights in China than all of Hillary's trips. Why? Because there's power with that brand and how many people he employed. And in 1 nanosecond, he could make a decision that improved the lives of hundreds of people. So with that backdrop, I have been looking for a long time for the kinds of opportunities where there's power in a company, it's going to be profitable, and they're also doing something that's has tremendous social impact. And they're hard to find outside of things like clean tech and maybe what you're doing. I'll let you talk about that in a minute. There's a company that I've gotten really involved with lately, and it's called Make a Stand. And it is an example of a company that its social purpose is to raise money from the sale of products. In this case, lemonade is the first product, and more to come. And it was inspired by an 8-year-old girl who decided she wanted to end childhood slavery in her lifetime. And her parents said, well, you could sell lemonade, honey. And as she now says, her mom said, that's a lot of lemonade to really solve the problem. So anyway, now there's this amazing company that is raising its Series B. And they have a documentary that's just come out, a full-length documentary. They have an application that they're going to announce at the end of the month in concert with Square and Twitter, and it's very cool. So that has a lot of promise, and it's exciting because there are lots of great beverage companies that you can get excited about, and then here's a beverage plus company that is going to take a percentage of each item sold, and it goes right off the top into this cause, and that's just beautiful. So I think what we know we need to have happen is more maturing of financial organizations around that space so that it'll be easier to take them to the next level.
I have a question related to that.
Yeah.
I've been given mixed opinions about my company is potentially very profitable, but I have a bigger vision that we're building the technology to create, and I have a investor who's an advisor, and he tells me, don't talk about that. Don't talk about that when you go and meet the V. They want to hear just the cha-ching. They don't want to hear, somebody talking about doing good in the world. And I told him, well, then I don't want them to invest. And he said, never say that again. But I feel that way. I really do. And am I being innocent? I mean,
No, you're not. The truth is that most investors still want to hear, how am I going to make money?
Right.
And they don't want to think that their return is watered down by your social benefit. Now, that's the traditional view, and then there is an emerging view that says, I do want to know what your social benefit is, and how are you going to be true to that, and how do I know you're authentic, etc. So I think it's a fine line right now. It's definitely, I know people that could be B Corps, they're choosing not to be because they're afraid of the stigma.
I would like
You
to
probably
be
see that.
Well, it gives you license to divert funds away from the shareholders to a mission.
Right. Right,
And that's what VCs don't like about it.
right.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
he works for a company that's funded by Goldman Sachs, and he said that every time the CEO of the company gets on and starts talking about issues, he gets a phone call from Goldman Sachs saying, "What is he doing? Get him off." And I'm saying, well, again, I don't want Goldman Sachs, so yeah, I don't know. Again, you know, I feel like blabbing all the time, so I'm never 100% sure how much to shut up.
You know, I guess my advice would be to try to have a really strong business case, independent of the social benefit,
Right.
that you walk people through how
Right.
you're gonna make money,
Right,
how powerful it is.
right.
And then say, and by the way,
Mhm.
here's the side benefit, the offshoot from this successful business.
Right.
You know, even with Make a Stand, you know, we know it has to be a kick-ass, successful
Right, it has
business.
to make money.
Or there won't
Right.
be money to give to the cause.
Right.
You know, so it's definitely, I don't, it's tricky, I don't think they have to conflict.
Yeah.
And
I
I
think more
think
people, my feeling is that there are more investors today who want that.
There
I mean,
are.
I do,
there are,
and
Yeah.
I think that we're more aware and conscious and.
Yeah. I agree
Yeah.
with you. And I think there's something that's generational too, that
Right.
you know, I hear from large money managers that people that are 40-ish and they're coming into their, you know, mid-40s, like where they're starting to inherit money,
Mhm.
and their values are, I don't want to just put it in a mutual fund.
Right.
I want to know that I'm
Making a
making a
better
difference. And they're driving some of that. And you really see the social impact space has been heating up.
Yeah.
So it might be a question of thinking
Finding
about
the
the right investors.
Right.
So,
And in
Yeah,
your
we'll talk to you
case,
about that.
did you try to think of business and have a foundation from your business?
Well, I'm
Like
just
separate
focusing
a
on the
little bit?
business right now. I'm focusing strictly on the business, but I have this bigger vision that the technology we're gonna build will solve. So, I'm advised to just talk about the business. 'Cause business itself is $1 billion, you know, the numbers are great, it's good on its own. But I want to have people invest in the company that see that bigger vision, that will understand when we maybe make a decision which isn't totally, you know, the money, and it is more for the impact.
right.
'Cause that's my vision.
So we've got a few minutes left.
I
If
would stick
anyone's
to
got
it.
any
Yeah.
pressing questions for Gwen, now's your opportunity, and then we'll break for coffee and cupcakes.
Cupcakes.
I have a comment on that. So I went to something called Impact Investing Cases at Haas in Berkeley, and we talked about two cases. One was like the whole small, medium-sized companies in India and how there's kind of a funding gap.
Yeah,
Right. And so and then the other one was in Indonesia, where you would there was a company allowing you to buy minutes easily, and where you would have agents running around. And so very different companies, different countries, but then you have to choose one of them, and then so both of them are like a business, and they have massive impact. It's just that so to have that kind of impact in the U.S. is not necessarily as easy, or in the developed country, as if you were to go in a developing country. So I think, you know, you don't necessarily have to talk much about the impact. It's kind of like understood, whereas there's an opportunity of filling a gap or making something more efficient, and that in itself has an impact.
Any more questions? It has to be brief though, because I think people are starting to fade. Need that sugar coffee break, right? No more questions? Well, thank you so much, Gwen. Before you go, I've got some more books. These VCs are so generous. So from Gwen's talk, when someone asked her about expanding, I think it might have been you, Olga, what was her response about where do you start and where do you go? Looking at foreign countries.
It's better to prove the concept in one country and then scaling it. So.
Start local, go global. And from Harvey in Switzerland, there's two things that investors want. What's the main thing they want?
ROI?
Nice and simple. What is it?
Profit.
Money.
Yeah, who said that?
And that money or profit is
And what did she say? What did she say that's emerging in the investor community now, along with the money?
Impact investing.
I'm sorry?
Impact investing. Like
Social impact.
Social impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Could you pass that down to this gentleman? Okay, guys. So we'll break now.